We're back. It is our final, I guess you would say the final off-season podcast. October. Hallelujah. August 31st, we are recapping roster cuts. Chris Ballard's comments from yesterday is it probably will be the final time. I don't know, maybe hopefully the final time we hear from the GM until January. So we'll unpack all of that on today's Kevin's Corner. I am Kevin Bowen. Eddie Garrison is with me per usual. Next week, we'll come at you with a midweek pod, and that'll be previewing week 1 against Jacksonville.
Let's go. Talking about actual football.
We will talk about actual football and the challenge that lies ahead in the season opener. Obviously, today's podcast early on will be heavily Chris Ballard, Jonathan Taylor related. We'll go position by position through the roster cuts, take a look at where the 53-man roster stands as we record this on Thursday morning, and Twitter questions per usual. Mr. Garrison, how you doing?
Doing well. KB, how are you? Got to see the 53-man roster practice for the first time yesterday, and then got to chat with the Colts GM. How was everything yesterday?
Yeah, it was obviously, I think, great to hear from one side of, a storyline that has so much saga. I tweeted out yesterday after the press conference, I think it's time to hear from the other side of it. I think Jonathan Taylor, open up your notes app for all I care. Fire off some answers to, I think a lot of questions that need to be answered from the Taylor side of it, but I thought Chris Ballard summed up everything right away with that. This sucks. It sucks. It sucks for the Colts. It sucks for Jonathan Taylor. It sucks for the fans. There are no winners in this. I would make the argument, I don't know if one party is like that demonstratively more right than the other party. I think both have been at fault. Both have had some pretty childish moments, probably the Taylor camp more so than the other side of it. And at the end of the day, Eddie, it all revolves around the root question. How does anything impact Anthony Richardson this season? And I would argue that this hurts him. This hinders him. I know Chris Ballard pushed back on that yesterday. We can get to that question a little bit later. But to me, it does hurt him, and it sends the wrong message to him as well. And that's a disappointment when you're trying to make a strong early impression on your franchise quarterback. There are a few moments during yesterday's presser that I'm like, is Chris Ballard just having to, answer questions that Jim Irsay has told us otherwise? I mean, didn't Jim Irsay say, from an anonymous source standpoint, that there was a back injury and they were looking at a non-football injury? That obviously never happened. There was some reporting earlier in the week. I'm going to guess that the source on the reporting was the big guy. Jim Irsay saying he's on the PUP list, but we believe he's holding in. Again, Chris Ballard didn't go there. Is that Ballard just being politically correct and being legal and being, I guess, somewhat cordial in this relationship? It just seems like Irsay saying one thing off the record, Ballard has to say one thing on the record. So I think that is confusing aspect to all of this. But no, I thought Ballard did a nice job yesterday. I thought it was fine. I thought he handled. I appreciated him fielding all of the questions that he did. Obviously, some answers he didn't answer, or some questions he didn't answer. I understand that. There are, I would say, a good amount of GMs, Eddie, that would have got up there and offered an opening statement, if anything, and then wouldn't have answered anything after that. So I appreciate that from Ballard.
A lot of loaded questions, KB. A lot of loaded questions.
Yeah, I mean,
you loaded them suckers up, as he says.
Yeah, that's what he said walking off the podium. I went on Sirius Radio earlier this week, and they began the interview asking if I've watched Hard Knocks this season. I have not watched Hard Knocks this season, and I told them the reason why I haven't is because I cover Hard Knocks. The Colts are a living Hard Knocks. They are a soap opera. So when you have that, you're going to get loaded, quote-unquote, questions. So I didn't think, frankly, any of the questions that were asked yesterday were out of line, or I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't know, maybe a couple times that, I'm sure people had some of the issues of questions that I asked, but if it's the last time we're going to hear from Ballard until January, it's the time to get them all out. So about a half-hour media session there. A couple of takeaways from Ballard. Again, he makes it clear in a public setting that Jonathan Taylor's still hurt. and is still complaining of ankle pain, and it's not 100%, and that's why he's on the PUP list. The Colts are paying him, $238,000 per week to be on that PUP list. That's a pretty expensive paycheck to be paying a guy if you don't think he's hurt. Like, again, I think Jim Irsay is doing from an anonymous manner. So that's where we're at right now with Taylor from a PUP standpoint. I think if you had to sum up Ballard's stance on the why are we not extending Taylor right now, it would be three things. According to Ballard, it is because of the ankle issue. And then the other two situations would be we have a new coaching staff and we just won 4 games. So if you have to kind of summarize everything Ballard said into one little snippet, those would be the 3 reasons I would point to. Now, my thoughts, I think if Ballard was healthy, if Taylor was healthy, he would not have the extension that he wants. I feel pretty confident in that. Obviously, we'll get into the coaching staff. We'll get into the 4-win answer and all of that. But I think to summarize it, Eddie, those are the 3 reasons. 4 wins, new coaching staff, and the ankle issue, according to Ballard.
Yeah, according to Ballard. Yesterday when I was listening, and I watched it again this morning before we recorded the pod, he's just all over the place with Taylor. At the beginning, it's about the contract and they have a problem to work with. And then it's the ankle. And then it's we're a 4-win team. And then it's a new coaching staff. Like, make up your mind. Is it one or the other? And then stick with it. Like, to keep bouncing around on these different things, I don't know. I just don't get a good vibe out of the whole situation between the two sides.
Yeah, I walk away from yesterday, Eddie, and I don't feel any better about the Colts mending this or calming the waters, to steal a phrase from Irsay.
Especially when the GM says, yeah, I haven't talked to Jonathan. I've talked to his agent.
Yeah, I don't... That one didn't bother me so much because obviously Ballard has been busy with roster cuts, and there's a lot that goes into that. I do think they do chat for what it's worth. They just haven't done it here recently. The 4-win comment got a lot of play, and understandably. Part of me thought immediately after that press conference was over, I'm thinking, boy, there's probably a large amount of people that think 4 wins is the win total for the Colts this year. So if you go out and win 4 games this year, does that mean Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, and Grover Stewart are all free agents in March? And none of them are coming back? That one didn't really check for me. I understand the new coaching staff a little bit, but I don't get because we were 4-12-1, that means we don't extend players. I mean, Eddie, if we were to make a list of 100 reasons why the Colts went 4-12-1 last year, I don't know where I'd put Jonathan Taylor on the list, but I know it wouldn't be in the top upper quartile of quartiles of quartiles.
Nice.
And in a way, when you make a statement like that, Eddie, you infer some blame towards Taylor for last season. And we're talking about, this is the dude that has the best yards per carry the NFL has seen through 3 NFL seasons in the history of the NFL. The best yards per carry, whatever it is, 5.2, 5.1, I forget what the exact number is, through the first 3 years with having more than 700 carries. I mean, it's just an eye-popping figure that he's produced. Again, at a time where the running game is not, what it was once before. And I'm like, boy, 4-12-1, you're inferring some blame on Taylor. You're 4-12-1 because your staff thought Carson Wentz had something, and he could be resurrected. And Taylor carried Carson Wentz through that 2021 season. And when that quarterback experiment failed at the end, then you had to scramble and think that Matt Ryan still had gas in the tank. And the offensive line you've richly invested in, that group breaks down last season and doesn't play up to par. And key defensive pieces either banged up or not living up to the type of contracts that they have. Again, nowhere on that list to me am I finding Jonathan Taylor. Nowhere on the list did Jonathan Taylor say, hey, Jeff Saturday, come be our interim coach and lead us to 7 wins this season. So that comment I think understandably for the Taylor camp is really going to bother them. And to me, I don't think as a GM I'd have this hard line in the sand philosophy of we win 4 games, no one gets extended. That to me doesn't check. Do you have questions? Sure. Do you challenge previous thinking? Without a doubt. I think a 4-win year should challenge all of processes and all of how you go about your blueprint, your roster construction, all of those things. But I don't think that needs to be one of the hard cut in line and maybe the reason why Taylor is not getting this extension. You know, when Ballard says, like, I have to do the best thing for the team and the organization, that was, a line that he talked about yesterday. Part of me thinks so much of his job, maybe the most important part of his job, is find good players and keep good players. Like, if you want to kind of summarize it.
Yeah.
That, and I know that's a really elementary way to say it, but I think that is the case. And I guess that kind of leads into my final Ballard-related point, which I'm shaking my head at right now, and I assume this is not on the talking point sheet. When I asked him the question about, do you feel like you're hindering or stunting Anthony Richardson's development?
Oh, that's bad.
With not having Jonathan Taylor around, and he said, he brought up the analogy of, what Andrew Luck had at quarterback, what Andrew Luck had at running back in that 2012 season. I think it's absolutely asinine to compare Anthony Richardson exiting college to Andrew Luck. I think I've mentioned on this podcast several times, I think it's a bit crazy when we try to compare Anthony Richardson's situation here in year 1 to other running style, inefficient, inaccurate quarterbacks that exited college, and I'm just inserting names I see. Josh Allen, in terms of playing time he had at Wyoming.
Cam Newton.
Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton reaching the pinnacle of individual success, college football-wise, Cam's case, team-wise. In Lamar's case, obviously, Heisman Trophy as well. Like, it's ludicrous to compare Richardson to those guys. And then when he says Luck, I'm thinking, oh, my God. 2 Heisman runner-ups, right, on the Andrew Luck collegiate resume. Won every other meaningful award at his time at Stanford, exiting in 20. He would have been the number 1 pick probably the year before, exiting in 2011. Mentioned in whatever, John Elway, Peyton Manning sort of breath in terms of can't miss prospect, all of those things. When you have players that have performed at a different level, whether it's experience-wise in college or it's individual team success-wise, that impacts, in my opinion, the urgency and the need to build. But again, even if you want to take the Luck case study there, what did they do? They made it a massive priority to re-sign Reggie Wayne that first year. Mm-hmm. They then came back in the draft and they went skill, 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 the first 3 selections of that 2012 draft. And obviously those guys, maybe their 5 to 7 year trajectory didn't live up to what you wanted to, but T.Y. Hilton, Dwayne Allen, and Kobe Fleener, all in their own rights, had pretty good early starts to their careers. So that is kind of the issue that that one I just have to push back on there. And it's different with Richardson. It's just flat out different. And that's why I raise my hand. I've talked out of both sides of my mouth with this situation. I have a overall expansion football team roster construction belief that running back is not 1, 2, 3 on that list. Mm-hmm. I don't want to spend premium draft picks on a running back. But when you've got the unicorn at quarterback, things shift, things change, and that's where my philosophy with Taylor changes. Last thing I'll say, Eddie, before you chime in on anything Ballard related, I have gotten this question a lot here lately. How mad is Taylor about last season? I think there are times last year where Taylor felt like he was pushing pretty darn hard to play and ended up playing. And I think he views himself not being rewarded for that.
Internally with himself or externally from other people in the building?
I'd say more externally than anything. Now, again, I've mentioned before, super hypersensitive about his body. But I think he looks at last year, and again, if you are Ballard and you hear, if you're Taylor and you hear Chris Ballard say yesterday, we're not going to put a guy out there unless he's 100%. I think Jonathan Taylor would raise his hand and say, I was playing at less than 100% last year.
And what player is playing at 100% throughout the course of the season anyway?
That as well. So I think that's where the Taylor camp, and this is why I'd love to hear from Taylor, but that's where, and I'm speaking for him here, I think that's where he has a gripe of saying, yesterday you're saying to me, I'm not putting you out there if you're not 100%. Whereas last year, I'm, whatever, busting my ass, making sacrifices on a 4-win football team with an interim head coach to try and continue to play. So, yeah, I think that's a side of Taylor that maybe we haven't talked about enough with all of this.
And the fact that he may not have been healthy and he still had that, that 150-yard game against the Raiders is just kind of speaks to the kind of talent that Jonathan Taylor is. A couple things that I want to get to before we get into more either Chris Ballard or get into the roster breakdown.
Yeah, let's focus anything Taylor related here. I do want to get into a couple of, I guess we can kind of tie the other Ballard roster related comments into the cut downs, but anything Ballard Taylor related.
Mitch had this question in Twitter questions. I was already going to ask you something along this, so I'm just going to toss it in here with it. Mitch and I pretty much want to know, why is Jonathan Taylor exactly on PUP? Because you've talked about it a little bit. And I thought when you just mentioned it with Ballard and he said, the player is complaining about nagging ankle pain. And then he later gets asked about how confident are you and your medical staff to assess and get Jonathan Taylor healthy? He goes, I'm confident. I'm real confident. That was all he had to say on that front. And to me, that was the only time he ever mentioned Jonathan Taylor in the same sentence or in the same lingo with the medical staff. So part of me wants to believe that report that Mike Chappell had that the team may not believe that he's actually hurt is actually kind of true.
Yeah, and again, this is where the complexity of this Taylor situation, Eddie, I wish I had a better grasp on, because I've heard such conflicting things to the point of like, oh my gosh, Europe to look at this ankle. Or you put pen to paper on it, and he does what Shaq Leonard did a couple camps ago. And
exactly.
He's out there giving it a go. So that's the crazy uncertainty curveball in all of this. And again, in my opinion, you have Irsay saying to Chappell, we think it's a hold-in. Well, then publicly, Ballard is not even sniffing that. And I'll go back to what I just said. I think Taylor has a little bit of venom from last year of saying, I pushed through it. I tried to play. I mean, Taylor was on the field in what? Was he on the field for the Dallas game? I feel like the Minnesota game.
He was on field for the Dallas game, and then he got hurt after the screen pass against Minnesota.
Yeah, early in that Minnesota game.
Yeah.
So, he is on the field in December games when the season was absolutely toast at that point. And the lack of recognition, acknowledgement of that, I think bothers him, especially for a guy that, again, has been so durable throughout his career with that. I mean, do they beat the Raiders? I mean, that game came down to the final play of the game. Do they beat the Raiders without Taylor? Probably not. And what do you think how close that game was?
150 yards rushing. I don't think you would have won that game without that.
Are you a 3-win football team? Is Jeff Saturday winless in the old Saturday era? So that is a curveball to it. But I'll go back to what I said earlier, Eddie. I still think with a healthy Jonathan Taylor, we would not sit here with a contract extension for him. I could be wrong on that, but that is my thought on it. Mitch's point, why is he on PUP? Irsay says one thing, Ballard says the other. Irsay says it off the record, Ballard says it on the record. That's why we need to hear from Taylor. I mean, to be on PUP is a big deal. Think about it.
Do you think you will, though?
Will Taylor talk? No, I'm not holding my breath at all. Take out the notes app, man. Well, do it.
Do a live stream of some sort. I don't know.
Reread it a million times. Yeah, tape something to the point. You don't have to make it live, Tape it. Make sure your answer sounds beautiful. Re-record it 13 times. Act like you're sending, your 90th happy birthday message to your grandma here. Like, that is what I think needs to happen next. And again, major kudos to Chris Ballard for what he did yesterday. I mean, that was a half hour of fielding questions. Did he answer all of them? No. But he spoke. And that's a big part of what steps need to be taken. Obviously, actions are going to speak louder than anything. But again, Mitch's point, he is on PUP. Eddie, That dude is making, what, $238,000 per week to not practice or not play? That is quite the move if you feel like he's healthy.
I was about to ask you, is this some sort of gamesmanship part on the Colts side of things to not completely burn down the bridge? You may have two pillars left on it, but like it's like you're saying like, hey, we don't think you're injured, but we don't want to risk any possibility of reuniting this relationship, coming back together. So if you are seriously complaining about this ankle problem, we'll put you on PUP so you can still get paid versus activating him off the PUP, him continuing to have this hold out, hold in, whatever we want to phrase it,
right, and
then gets fined for not showing up.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you start to fine him, insert the dog house on fire emoji. I mean, hell, we're pretty much at that anyways, but by that point, gone is beyond.
Everything
that.
Is fine.
Yeah, so
everything is fine.
That's where we would be at. So yes, Mitch, it is conflicting, but what it means is this: he's on PUP. He can't practice or can't play in the first 4 weeks. He ain't playing in week 5. It's not like he's going to just pop off the PUP list and he hasn't practiced in 10 months and he's going to go out there.
Yeah.
And then you start getting into, the amount of games played to get the accrued season. And I mean, week 5 has got to put you at October. Huh?
Accrued.
What? That was my Indiana twang coming out there. Week 5 is what, October 8th? So at that point, Eddie, you're 3 weeks away from the trade deadline. And that is the next kind of hard line in all of this. One thing that I'll mention here, and I don't have anything else on Taylor after this. I know we'll have Twitter questions on it, so I kind of want to move into roster cuts unless you've got anything.
That's fine.
Miami and Green Bay. Those are reportedly the two teams that had legit interest, however you want to describe it, in Jonathan Taylor. Eddie, it tells me a whole lot about their interest in Taylor in relation to the Colts. Miami and Green Bay have Tua and Jordan Love.
Yes.
Two very yet-to-be-established quarterbacks in the NFL. Obviously, Tua you'd put on a higher, pedestal than Jordan Love, of course, at this point. But two former first-round picks, two guys that are reaching the back ends of their rookie contracts, and two guys that it's like, is he the guy? Is he not the guy? Those questions are being asked in those respective markets. And certainly in Miami's case, they've got some pretty impressive skill talent.
Oh, yeah.
What those organizations are saying, though, is, wait a minute. Could we add more? Could we support our yet-to-be-established quarterback even more? And that, to me, is something that, I'm trying to get at with the Colts. You want to make sure that cupboard is as stocked as possible. Beyond stock. Mm-hmm. And that's what Miami and Green Bay were looking into. Could we give our young quarterbacks more help? And again, I think Tua has done more in the NFL than obviously Richardson has. Jordan Love had more experience in college and had more individual success than Anthony Richardson had throwing the football. So both of those organizations are saying that. That's where I've always been at with the Colts and Richardson and what I want to see them do with this because, again, he is the unicorn. He's the rarest of rare when we talk about quarterback prospects entering this league. I mean, Eddie, I'm not going to make too much out of it, but if you even look at the preseason numbers, I think it was 12 rookie quarterbacks played in the preseason. Mm-hmm. And by played, I mean, at least 15, 20 snaps or at least 15, 20 throws is probably the better way to put it. The 44% completion percentage for Richardson was at the bottom of that 12-person list. Again, you've got to give him more because that is an area where you're going to lack. And I look at Green Bay and Miami and think, yep, that's what they should be doing. They should be trying to continue to make sure that they don't sit there at the end of the evaluation period with Tua and Jordan Love and say, boy, did we do enough? Did we give him enough? You don't want to be there as a franchise. Give the quarterback enough and let the quarterback tell you if you're right or wrong. Because if you are sitting there second-guessing yourself, now all of a sudden you failed the franchise. Mm-hmm. You failed that quarterback, and you're probably starting over. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be in that position. You have some control over that. You can control how aggressive you are in your skill group, offensive personnel around that guy.
And I look at an offseason of veteran free agent moves, and I see an Isaiah McKenzie, who was cut for 2 hours yesterday, and Gardner Minshew, and I don't consider that a whole lot of veteran free agent support. Trades, you can throw trades in there as well. Hell, you could throw waiver claims in there as well, I guess. I don't consider that a lot. And draft-wise, obviously Josh Downs, I'm very high on. I'm very intrigued by it. But it's not like you have the draft that you had with Luck in 2012, where, boom, the first 3 picks are all going to come in here and play a ton and directly impact Andrew or Anthony, like they did for Andrew back in 2012.
I'm interested about the contractual part of there with Isaiah McKenzie. Like, you cut him, so
that was weird.
I was like, how much does he get paid out of the contract he initially signed, and then how much are you signing him for to bring him back?
I thought you could have just put Jelani Woods on IR right then. I think there were other teams that had done that, had put guys on IR to return. Like, it's not like you had to wait another day for Jelani Woods. You put him on IR, 2 hours later?
Well, didn't they claim somebody first, and then that's what led to the release?
So they had
of
3
McKenzie?
corresponding roster moves. They waived McTelvin a Jim, they waived Isaiah McKenzie, and they waived Carter O'Donnell. Those were their 3. My question is, and again, this is probably more for like NFL cap expert, would be why not just do the Jelani Woods to IR when you waived Isaiah McKenzie?
Yeah, I don't know.
You did it 2 hours later. You just flip-flopped the roster move. Is it a restructure? I don't know exactly what it looks like. Again, I think Isaiah McKenzie. Well, let's just get into it, Eddie. Let's go position by position. I was looking at the 53-man roster.
There was 2 things real quick I wanted to bring up with Ballard, just really, really quick.
Yeah.
When he was going through the tight ends, I don't know if I'm reading too much into this or not. Mentions Drew Ogletree, mentions Kylan Granson, mentions Will Mallory. No mention of Jelani Woods, who's hurt, and no mention of Mo Alley Cox. I know there's been a lot of things going on with Jelani, health related to for him to stay on the field, so I understand that part of it. But then the Mo Alley Cox lack of mention to me, I think, speaks louder than anything else.
I asked Shane Steichen about it over the weekend, Eddie. What do you kind of view his role here in 2023? I didn't think it was the most ringing endorsement for Mo. Obviously, he's still here. I think he needs to be here, frankly, if Woods is going to miss 4 weeks. I mean, Granson is just not that body type. And Ogletree is still yet to play a snap. I mean, Ogletree is intriguing to me, but him and Mallory have yet to play a snap, and both of them have dealt with their own sort of physical things as well. So yeah, that was something that stood out. I don't think it all of a sudden means Mo Cox is gone in the next week, but I mean, there might be a time this season, Eddie, where it's like, wow, all your tight ends are healthy. Is Mo now the odd man out?
And then to make a pivot to roster breakdown position by position, I want to start with cornerback.
You want to go Darius Rush first?
Yes, yeah. Chris Ballard explaining pretty much the reason why they had to let Darius Rush go was because of Jalen Jones, and he really, really likes Tony Brown.
So I went back and forth on this a lot during roster cuts, Eddie. Do they keep 6 or do they keep 7 corners? I went with 6. I had Tony Brown being cut because I viewed it like this.
What was the number that you got right?
I think I missed 3. I'd have to go back and look. Maybe it was 4, but then I had McTelvin and Jim getting cut. I mean, do you count him as getting cut? And then the whole 24-hour period afterwards is kind of weird. Like, is Carter O'Donnell a yes or is Carter O'Donnell a no? Like, Jelani Woods to IR was something I've thought about, but whatever.
Nonetheless, impressive.
Neither
nice
here nor there. Okay, at corner. And this gets back into our dictionary definitions we have to think about this time of year. Waived is for guys that have played in the league for less than 4 years. You get exposed to waivers. Released means you've been in the league for over 4 years. You've earned the right to then be a free agent and not be exposed to waivers. So my thinking with the roster cuts was you release Tony Brown. You know he's a free agent. You say to Tony Brown's agent, let us get through the first 48 hours of this roster gymnastics, and we'll bring your guy back. Or at the very least, we'll put him on practice squad, which I'm sure Tony Brown's agent doesn't want to hear, and then we'll bump him up for early game days, and then hopefully we can sneak a guy through at some point, whether that is Darius Rush, whoever that is. I thought it was interesting when I asked Taylor about Rush yesterday. The answer, I didn't
Ballard?
hear, when I asked Ballard about Rush yesterday, the answer had nothing to do with anything negative towards Rush.
No.
It was all about Jalen Jones and Tony Brown and the special teams impact, the nickel impact that Tony Brown brings. And
really nothing of off the field, nothing of even Rush's ups and downs. My issue with cutting Rush is this. First off, you could do both. You could keep Jalen Jones and Tony Brown and Darius Rush. You have 6 defensive tackles. Right now, you've got 10 offensive linemen. And they've combined to start 1 game in the NFL. 2 of them you just got off waivers. It's not like there are not positions you could pull from a little bit here or there. If you really wanted to, maybe even a 6 linebacker. Like, there are some other spots you could pull from. Now, I think when you look at Rush's situation, it's a premium position in a guy that had some flashes this offseason. And I don't like cutting premium position draft picks when they flashed a little and when they're still young to the position. Remember, Darius Rush was a wideout early on at South Carolina. It's not even like he is this, and he played a whole lot of special teams at South Carolina as well. So it's not like some of the knocks you'd put on a Mike Strawn, for example, in terms of not playing special teams. Rush doesn't have those same knocks. And I think exposing him to waivers was just a risk that if you're in this tank rebuild mode, I don't see why you would risk that. There are other guys you could risk, veterans you could cut that you don't risk on waivers there. They would just be free agents. And the last thing on Rush, Eddie, I believe yesterday the number was 24 players that were claimed. So you had 24. Arizona, of course, had 6 of them. That was the big eye-popping number. The Colts had 3. Of the 24 guys claimed, 10 of them play in the secondary. That is a big, big number. 10 of the 24. To me, what does that say? It says the NFL knows it's a pass-happy league and every team's trying to find those guys. And they're going to take chances on them. Mm-hmm. And that's what Kansas City's doing with Rush. So Jalen Jones has been very good this preseason in this camp. Very good. He unquestionably deserved to make the roster. You could have kept both. And that's my issue there with Rush.
I want to actually talk about defensive line because you mentioned them. You've got 10 defensive linemen.
You're hopping around. I thought we just go in order.
I know. Well, you brought up defensive line, so I just
okay. All right.
Nice little segue there into the defensive line. Kwity Paye, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart. Obviously, your 3 starters with Samson Ebukam, Tyquan Lewis, Taven Bryan, and Eric Johnson are your backups. Adetomiwa Adebawore, part of that
Nice.
3rd string.
Very nice.
Any others that you want to name in there?
No, again, McTelvin, a gym cut. Khalid Kareem, I thought had a chance. Al-Qadim Muhammad, I thought had a chance. Saw Kareem claimed by the Bears, of course. The Bears saw him up close and personal in those joint practices and that preseason game where Kareem stood
Titus
out.
Leo to IR, correct?
Yeah, Titus Leo to IR. I know that was a question I had. I'm obviously not high on the list, but let's talk about Isaiah Land here, defensive end.
Yeah.
I'll label him here. He's an intriguing guy that they claimed yesterday off Dallas. I think a big part of the waiver claims is you look around the league and say, where are teams deep? Let's make sure that we try and find those guys that they can't just keep.
Certainly Dallas would fit that bill.
Dallas is an edge rush group, pretty darn deep. And so Isaiah Land, if you look at his career at Florida A&M, 19 sacks as a junior. I mean, that's Robert Mathis, like low-level, eye-popping production. Kind of a tweener. I know there was an academic issue really throughout the whole Florida A&M program as well. I'm trying to kind of give you a little bit of background on why he would have fallen. He fell in the draft to the point of being undrafted. But, when you look at the waiver claims, Eddie, they found a big offensive tackle who's an athlete in Ryan Hayes, who started, 30-some games at left tackle at Michigan. And then Isaiah Land, in a way, almost, Eddie, I look at those guys as saying, okay, those are the darts at a board at positions that matter, left tackle and edge, that you're losing here in year 1 with Jake Witt and Titus Leo going on IR, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I like those ideas. I like the Isaiah Land thing. Small school pass rushers with intriguing traits and high in production. The thing is, and I know Leo had a lot of position switches at Wagner, Land actually produced much, much more than Leo. Leo didn't have, when I saw the draft pick of Leo, I'm like waiting to open up the bio and see 16 sack season. Mm-hmm. And it's not like he had that at Wagner. So
Yeah. D-line group, I think, does have some depth. I worry a little bit about, again, just the edge group giving enough pop with Pay and Ebukam and even Lewis and Dio. Like, all of them just seem to be power more than speed. And, like, the sacks are going to be effort-based, which, I mean, sacks are sacks, but, you know, you'd like a little bit more consistent like, speed rushes that are contributing to some of those hurries there. So, Isaiah Land, I think, is...
Would you put Quiddy in the power part of that, or would you put him like in the middle between like a power and a little bit of a speed?
See, I think more power than speed. I mean, I know the athletic traits were what they were at Michigan's Pro Day, and they were quite impressive, but I don't see it show up enough in his game.
Yeah. Linebackers, EJ Speed, Shaq Leonard, Zaire Franklin, Cameron McGrone, and
Shout out to the LC product.
Grant Stewart.
Cameron McGrone, he is a guy that I did not have. I had Doman. Doman went on IR. So Cameron McGrone, I mean, I thought yesterday it's a big day for Cameron McGrone to, you know, make it through the 3 cuts. You know, the Colts had to make 3 more roster moves when they made those waiver claims. So he's a guy that I thought stood out a little bit. I thought Liam Anderson had some moments. He goes to the practice squad, the undrafted rookie there. But for the most part, linebacker continues to be, you know, pretty easy to cut down with Chris Ballard.
And now your safeties. Julian Blackman, Rodney Thomas, and Nick Cross got some glowing remarks yesterday from Chris Ballard.
Yeah, Ballard certainly praised him. No surprises here. Denbo is always a guy that was kind of going to be your 4th safety. Ronnie Harrison is on the practice squad, who was with the team during the preseason cut down. So, yeah, safety and quarterback to me were the other two that was just like, yeah, I feel pretty confident about this.
All right, now moving over to offense. 3 quarterbacks, Richardson, Minshew, Ellinger. The Ellinger part about this fascinates me a little bit. I was texting with you about it yesterday, maybe 2 days ago. I can't remember.
Yeah,
you see, like, New England released or waived Bailey Zappi. He went unclaimed on waivers. And to me, no offense to Sam Ellinger, but if I had to choose between the two, I'd probably take Bailey Zappi just because he's had more production as a starter, and I've seen it from him. And I felt like a guy you could let Sam Ellinger go, and you could keep, you know, that additional corner in Darius Rush, and then stash Ellinger on your practice squad. Because we've talked about it a couple times. I don't think there's going to be anyone out there that would claim Ellinger if you were to waive him.
And let's clarify the rule change for this year. The San Francisco NFC Championship rule change is this: you can dress a 3rd quarterback that does not count against your 46-man game day dressing roster. But in order to do that, he must be on your 53. So that's what the Colts are doing here with Ellinger. I totally understand where you're coming from on that. I don't have, like, as big of a gripe. I think they view Ellinger as, like...
It's not a gripe. It's just more so an observation or something that I personally would have done over what they decided to do.
And part of me was like, to Shane Steichen look at Ellinger and be like, yeah, we can get that anywhere. You know, that was a question that I had going into roster cuts. Do they look at Ellinger and say, hey, he's a nice scout team quarterback. He does some dual threat nature.
I think they've been just so, like, quarterback snake bitten isn't the right term, but, like, they've had to scramble at times quarterback-wise. They're going to kind of cover their ass. And if there's any position to do it at, I think quarterback's fine. Again, not to say Ellinger saves the franchise if all of a sudden that you need him to throw in there. But, yeah, I didn't have too much of an issue with this.
You've got 4 backs, 2 hurt. Well, allegedly, one of them is hurt. Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, Deion Jackson, and Evan Hull.
I mean, right now, we're recording this again Thursday morning. Zach Moss was not practicing on Wednesday. We'll see about today at 1 o'clock. I know there are some people out there that think he's definitely going to miss the start of the season. I would assume, Eddie, if he is going to play week 1, he need to be out there Monday. After today, I don't think they practice again until Monday. I think he would need a full week. I mean, I know it's an upper body injury. It's a broken arm, so lower body-wise, you would hope the cardio has still been able to be kept up. And obviously, you can rotate in those backs, but we'll ask, veteran running back. We'll see if that happens. But as of now, Deion Jackson, Evan Hull, and Zach Moss when he gets healthy, and then 2 running backs on the practice squad, and Jake.
Oh my goodness, that's great.
Do you edit that out?
No, I can't. I'm sorry.
Did I say funk?
No. On the second time you did.
Oh, God.
Before we transition to wide receiver.
I need food. I need lunch, man.
Do you have any inclination on how carries would be divvied up if
Oh, gosh.
Moss
You sound
were
like
not-
you're in a 30-team fantasy league.
I was
here.
going to say it's fantasy football season, Kevin, so you never know.
Jackson start, Hull, Bellum, they split reps. I really don't know. That would be my guess. It'd be a Jackson start, and then Hull would go in there, and they'd bring the F word off the practice squad.
For a moment yesterday, Colts had 3 wide receivers. You talked about Isaiah McKenzie's back. He's their 4th. Pittman, Pierce, Downs, the other 3.
Yeah. Juwan Winfrey was the 5th that I had. I thought I made it clear there's no chance to keep a 6th. Didn't think Mike Strawn was going to make the team at all. But the 5th was just a dart at a board. And I mean, hell, Eddie, they have 5 wideouts now on the practice squad?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Winfrey being one of them.
Yeah, Winfrey being one of them. I mean, 5 of the 17 guys in the practice squad are wideouts. It's a massive number. So it is simply dart at a board. I think I saw Field Yates reported earlier today they did make a waiver claim for a wideout. The Cardinals got the wideout. He's a Stanford kid. His name escapes me right now. But, this is where the Doolin injury comes into play. It's really hard to incorporate a 5th wideout on a game day. But it's one of those things where, you can't have Pittman or Pierce get hurt.
Yeah.
You get hurt. Who is your taller back? It's one of those guys off the practice squad. So
Elijah Higgins.
that was the guy's name from Stanford?
Yeah, 5 teams had a claim on him. Cardinals, Colts, Titans, Commanders, Packers.
Yeah. So, wideout-wise, I know a lot of people made a huge thing about, oh, my gosh, you only kept 4, and for a moment yesterday you only kept 3. Part of me want to be like, where have you been? I don't – this is not breaking news. The Colts lack quality wideouts. Hello? I mean, this has been an issue throughout the Ballard. It was like people just showed up from Mars.
Freaking Bowen over here writing about wide receivers.
Called me Kevin yesterday.
I saw that. I
felt
heard
like
that.
I had to go clean my room at that point there. So, this to me dates back to more of a free agent March. Paris Campbell, you weren't able to retain, those sorts of wideout issues, and not necessarily just waiver claim problem.
Yeah. Tight ends, Kylan Granson, Mo Alley Cox, Drew Ogletree, Will Mallory, and Jelani Woods on injured reserve.
Let's go back real quick to McKenzie. To me, he's going to have a gadget role. To me, he's going to have a gadget type.
Special teams, returner.
Yeah, unique role. So I thought he had a decent training camp. I know, he has a huge drop issue that is clear in the NFL. I did not really see that during camp. So was that, a blip on the radar? Who knows? But I just wanted to kind of explain what I think McKenzie's role will be here in year 1 of him in Indy. Okay, tight end wise, yes, Jelani Woods to IR to return. I mean, the hamstring injury has been beyond nagging, an aggravation of it. Boy, the Colts have had a lot of hamstring injuries here this offseason. Just a huge bummer, right? Woods,
Yeah.
I mean, he's a guy that you obviously pegged as a breakout player and one of the few individual bright spots late last season for you, and this obviously hurts him. So, disappointing there.
I got a couple of news items real quick. Gil Brandt has passed away at the age of 91.
One of the certainly just scouting godfather, if you will, and a huge part of why the Combine has had the growth and the traction in Indianapolis that it's had. So,
Secondly,
condolences to his family.
the Dolphins just placed Jeff Wilson Jr. on injured reserve.
Uh-oh. Trade time. So the Purdue dude is their leading guy, right?
Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane are their 2 lead backs.
There you go.
Achane just drafted out of Texas A&M. Offensive line, tackles, Bernard Ryman, Arlington Ambright, Braden Smith, Blake Freeland. Guards, Will Fries, Quentin Nelson, and Wesley French. And your center, Ryan Kelly. Josh Sills, is he on the roster?
Yes.
Ryan Hayes, too?
Yeah, those are the 2 new waiver claims. So quickly on those guys, Eddie. Well, quickly on those guys. Again, Hayes,
It's hard to keep up with all this stuff, man. I don't know how you do it.
We do have an updated version of the 53-man roster up on the website. I will continue to update that, by the way, through this first week. I always think it's ever-changing because now, Eddie, you're going to have, you cut McTelvin a gym. Maybe another team is going to want him. You're still going to have some tinkering. Ryan Hayes, again, out of Michigan, former tight end, put on weight. Think about the Chris Ballard mold at tackle, the tall, athletic guy. 29 starts there, was with Miami in the preseason. And then the other guy, Stills. Eddie, I can't remember. I don't know if he was at the Super Bowl when this happened, but it was right around the Super Bowl last year. He was with Philly, undrafted at Oklahoma State the previous year. He had the rape and the kidnapping charges on him from a 2019 incident. Those charges, I believe, was either found not guilty or the charges were dropped. But if you're going to Google him, you're going to get that, before you get really anything else. Last year with the Eagles, I think he played one game with 4 special team snaps. That was it. Interior guy, played a ton of positions in college at West Virginia first, then Oklahoma State. So backup-wise, Eddie,
he was acquitted.
It's this. Acquitted, thank you for the exact legal jargon there. Backup offensive lineman, Danny Pinter at IR, beyond a bummer, season over, brutal. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 right now. Those 5 guys have combined to play. They've combined for 1 NFL start. That's Mr. Hambright. His last action came in 2020. Josh Stills, as we said, has not played an offensive snap, 4 special team snaps. The other 3, French, Freeland, and now Hayes, 0 NFL snaps. I consider that we're doing s'mores in the summer and Rosie Bowen's getting too close to the fire. Asked Bauer that question yesterday. Didn't really think it was too big of an issue. At some point you got to play the youth. You got to, how do you get experience? You play. I get that to a degree. I think with 5
How do you become a veteran?
I think 5 depth spots, you can balance that out. You can have a couple of vets and 3 guys you're trying to develop, grow, et cetera, et cetera. And I've said this before, Eddie, with Richardson this offseason, positions that directly impact Anthony Richardson, I don't want to try and shortcut, skimp, go youth movement. Defensively, sure. Secondary, embrace the youth movement. Offensively, O-line.
Part of me that something that stands out is like Wesley French and Josh Sills are primarily right guards. They're not left, although those are pretty interchangeable. So right now, there's not a true backup to Ryan Kelly or Quentin Nelson. And on the Kelly front of it,
yeah, I think French would be the backup there. He has taken some
center
reps, and I mean not all of a sudden like you're going to sleep well at night that I gave you that info, but I thought I'd give it to you.
Yeah, I just think it's unusual that there's not really a natural backup center, especially.
And I guess Pinter would be that, but again, granted, Pinter was making
he's probably
position change,
and he's
State.
Obviously not going to be available at all this year. That does everything besides the specialists. Rigoberto Sanchez, yep. Matt Gay, Luke Rhodes. Anything else you want to hit on with roster?
Again, I will continue to update this on our website throughout the week, so check that out there. Just a couple things quickly to note, Eddie. It's a young group. I mean, your only guys 30 years old are what? Ryan Kelly and Luke Rhodes?
Yes.
No one's over the age of 30. It is a very young group, to say the least.
Ready for Twitter questions now?
Let's do them.
V is up first, and he asks, can we forget the Jonathan Taylor saga for a second and talk about how good Bernard Ryman has looked in camp? If he continues to progress and becomes our mainstay left tackle, I think that is more beneficial for Anthony Richardson's development than having Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. Tell me I'm wrong. P.S. Does Chris Ballard have a personal vendetta against you? Seems like every time you ask him a question, he gives you attitude. Hope you both can mend your relationship better, JT and the Colts. I will say, he did seem on edge yesterday.
Did he? Oh, I didn't think he was too edgy.
He seemed pretty defensive a lot.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I've seen him a little bit edgier, but
I guess there are some moments you can point to. I'll get to that second part here in just a second. Let's begin with the first. Eddie, boy, I hardly noticed Bernard Ryman in camp. That's a good thing. Probably not good for your edge rush, but it's a good thing for Ryman. If you handed me 2 cards right now and said, will Bernard Ryman work out better at left tackle or Kwity Paye at defensive end, I probably would take the Ryman one. And I know that might surprise some people. Certainly was drafted 2 rounds later, and I know had some really down moments early on, but I like the weight that he put on. I think that was a smart move in the offseason. Ryman to me there's some serious intrigue there. So I'm curious to watch that, obviously, against some real competition once the season rolls around, because obviously the edge group is a little different come Sunday afternoons. As far as the second part, and I guess V is referencing maybe the question I asked about Kareem Hunt, and I know there were some people that pushed back on me asking a Hunt question. I viewed it like this. Chris Ballard has not spoken since the start of camp. A lot of things have happened since the start of camp, including a reported offer for Kareem Hunt. The next time Chris Ballard is supposed to meet the media,
season will be over,
is January. So,
well, hopefully.
I've got a credential. It's my job to use it and ask the questions that I feel are relevant and needed to be asked. And if they are to get Kareem Hunt at some point, I feel like that question needs to be asked of a franchise that so publicly preaches high character, culture, mental health, all of those things. I think the Kareem Hunt incident is well documented. We all have probably seen it by now, and I thought that the question was relevant. So, I mean, Ballard was probably pissed at it. You know, that was when he dropped the Kevin on me. But I just think that's part of the territory of you're going to make a move like that, bring him in, reportedly make an offer. You should expect that question.
And not only with like Kareem, but like as we were talking about with Josh Sills and then Chris Lamons.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A couple other guys that have had a question mark around their character that have been recently added to the roster.
And, you know, Ballard brought up, you know, there were a lot of people that didn't want us to draft a certain player, and he would stand up for the community. You know, I think that was a reference to Bobby Okereke, if I'm guessing, the sexual assault incident at Stanford. And I apologize. I should have double-checked this before talking about it. I think if I remember correctly, basically, like, there were 5 votes on the Stanford board or student policy board, and I think it had to be 4 of the 5. That was the supermajority, if you will, that had to vote, and I think 3 of the 2 voted him guilty, if you will, and if it would have been a 4th, he would have been, I don't know, kicked out of the school. I forget exactly what all it was. Obviously, from a public standpoint, you know, Bobby had a nice 4 years here, and to me, the Kareem Hunt incident's a little bit different than all of that. Maybe it's just the public nature to it all that brings it more to the light. So, again, people can disagree with that. Like,
yeah,
I talk for 15 hours a week on radio and another hour or 2 on this podcast. You guys are going to disagree with things I say, questions I ask. I've got a credential, and I hold that in high regard. I think fans, typically, if fans have chatter about something, I try to take that to heart and ask those questions. And there are some people that had questions about Kareem Hunt. I have questions about Kareem Hunt, non-football related, so I deemed it necessary to ask the question. And if Chris has got a problem with that, then don't bring him in for a visit.
So in 2016, the New York Times revealed that the complainant decided not to file formal charges with the police in order to avoid the trauma of a police investigation.
This is Okereke?
Yes, turning instead to the university's in-house disciplinary board under the U.S. Department of Education's interpretation of Title IX. Universities are required to carry out investigations of sex crimes on campus and empowered to deal out discipline. According to the Times, Stanford's board voted 3-2 in favor of the complainants in both cases, but Okereke was not disciplined because the school required a vote of at least 4-1 to find the accused responsible. That is from Joel Erickson back in 2019. So there you go.
See, I assume that's who Ballard is referencing in the answer. And again, there's a reason why I didn't talk about the Kareem Hunt question in the first 50 minutes of this podcast. If you listen to our morning show today, we mentioned it for like 90 seconds. I don't think it's something I need to harp on at all. But if you are to sign him, I wanted to make sure we had a quote on that we can reference in talking about Kareem Hunt.
Flipping for the pod. Who is making the call on this trade/no decision? Jim Irsay or Chris Ballard? This feels like Irsay digging his heels in.
Yeah, this is a great question. I don't know. I'm a bit torn on it. I mentioned earlier, got Irsay. Well, he's got a back injury, and we're pursuing the non-football injury list, but this is off the record, and there's no way we're going to trade him. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, we'll let him listen to trade offers. Jim Irsay, we think this is a hold-in, off the record. But then Ballard, well, he's got pain in the ankle and he's on PUP. So part of me is like, Ballard has to cover up for him. But it's a very good question. I mean, Irsay has past precedent with running backs, and it's not to extend them. That's kind of the past precedent. Ballard's got Shaq Leonard scar tissue, I would argue. And I would like to think and hope it's Ballard driving a lot of this. But at the same time, I'm thinking, is this Irsay a little bit kind of on a high and mighty pedestal of this is how we do business as a franchise? This is how the CBA is? I mean, didn't Irsay mention the CBA a good amount when he was in the booth a few weeks ago?
Ballard even made a reference to it too yesterday.
Ballard did it yesterday, but didn't Irsay, that was kind of like the big theme almost from Irsay a few weeks ago. About
even dating back to the tweet
about the Taylor situation. Yes, that's a great point, Eddie. So, I think at the end of the day, both parties in different ways have hesitancy about giving Taylor a contract extension.
Craig, on the Jonathan Taylor saga, I can see both sides. The Jonathan Taylor side. Management set the precedent of paying their top players 1 year before their contract expires. JT is the top offensive weapon, yet the fifth highest paid. On the management side, JT should be honoring his contract regardless of what the market is. I'm a bit miffed by JT, as there are plenty of people who do not like their jobs but still show up and work hard every day. Why should he be different? If I was Ballard, why put him on PUP? Why not just fine him if he doesn't play, since he is under contract and he must play at least 6 games? I still want JT to be a Colt. He needs to act like an adult and finish out his contract. Is it 6 games or is it 8?
I thought it was 6. I got to double check that, though. Eddie, I think it's difficult, and I probably have done this before, so I apologize. I think it oftentimes is difficult to like compare the NFL workforce and the business of the NFL to like common business.
Yeah.
I mean, first off, the amount of money they make. Secondly, the amount of physical pain that they play through and then risk their bodies moving forward.
Must be on the team's roster for 6 regular season games or more during the current season.
Yeah. Again, Taylor's venom comes down like the organization has sent a message that if you exceed your rookie contract, we will reward you, and that's where Taylor is frustrated. And again, I can understand the Colts' overall thinking on this, certainly. And at the same time, I can understand Taylor's overall thinking of like, wait a minute. I was the best person that this company, if you will, the Colts, has seen in 70 years at this position and what he did in 2021. And you've paid all these players before. And that was one thing I disagreed with Ballard yesterday about how each case is different, how he's talking about, well, Nelson signed different, Ryan Kelly signed later, Nyheim Hines signed later. Once we get to like September 10th, Eddie, once we start the season, Kelly, Nelson, and Hines, I think those 3 specifically, they all signed their extensions in this first week of September.
Yes.
So once we reach the start of the regular season, if Jonathan Taylor doesn't have an extension, he's different. He's different than all of them. All those guys, outside of Grover, everyone signed them before the season started.
Was Pittman not talked about enough in that room?
Pittman? And that he should get one?
Yes.
I think he should. Yeah, I mean,
And what it would mean if he didn't receive one before week 1?
Yeah, I don't know if he's on that. Yeah, I don't know. You could probably look at his resume and Hines' resume. Obviously, it's a different type of looking contract, just with the position that he plays. I don't know. That's a fair statement to make. Of like, if we didn't have Taylor, would we be talking more about Pittman? That's a good point. I mean, Craig starts off with, I can see both sides of it. That's what makes this so difficult. Both parties, I think, have a lot of valid reasons to be taking these stances that they are. I think where the disappointment comes into is it's that it has continued to get to this. Why was this not hashed out March, April, May, June, July?
Yeah.
Why did it have to become so public? Why is it now the dominant storyline everywhere, nationally? Why is this the hanging cloud over Anthony Richardson's debut a week from Sunday? Are they going to put a pup sticker next to Jonathan Taylor's picture on the side of Lucas Oil Stadium? Pup question mark maybe? Would that be the better way to put it?
Yeah.
That is the shame in all of this. And I think Taylor, I thought it was beyond childish, the liking of the tweet by Taylor.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
On Tuesday, which he then unliked, of the Colts are holding me hostage. It's like, enough with cryptic social media. And I get that our generation is a part of it, and Taylor's generation is even more a part of it, because Taylor's 8 years younger than I am, or whatever the age difference is.
Same age as me. So, well, actually, I might be older than him.
He's 24, right, Taylor?
Yeah, he just turned 24, didn't he?
Enough. Harvard offered you out of college. You're a smart dude. Stop. Notes app. 4 screenshots. McAfee's perfected that. McAfee does the great notes app. When he has whenever McAfee has a long thing to say, he whips out that notes app. It's detailed. He's got humor. He's got info in there.
Oh,
McAfee, brilliant at it. Jonathan Taylor, take some notes.
He turns 25 in January, so I am older than him. Wild to think.
Who would win in a 40 tomorrow, you or Taylor?
Oh, he would probably still beat me on one leg.
So he is hurt, is what you're saying.
I don't know. I was born in September of 98, so he's 4 months younger than me. Wild to think about. That golf guy. He sent this in to me. He says, big fan of the podcast.
Can I be friends with him? That golf guy?
Yeah, that's his Twitter name.
All right. I love it.
He said he's a big fan of the podcast. His question is, given the Jonathan Taylor situation and the development of Anthony Richardson this season, what is the best win-loss record scenario? He's torn between wanting AR to exceed expectations and win 7 to 9 games while building his confidence for next year, and the opposite, winning 3 to 4 games, but at least the Colts could add a top 5 premier talent. Not sure which situation gets us the momentum necessary to contend a couple seasons from now. Curious for your thoughts. Also, I happened to live in Jacksonville and watched the Jaguars starters against the Dolphins last week. They look scary good, and week 1 might be a rough one to watch.
4.5 point spread.
Yeah? It's 4.5 now?
4.5, over to under.
He said, thanks for the great content as always as well.
Thank you, that golf guy, for the question. I'm not going to get too caught up in the wins and losses. There will be moments, fourth quarter moments this season, where it'll be 2 minutes, Colts be down 7. You're going to want Richardson to perform, of course, at a high level. But Eddie, tell me that I'm, a hypocrite if all of a sudden I get to the end of the season and I'm talking about a lack of wins and losses and being overly critical there. I tend to think, 8 wins versus 5 wins. Was that 10 draft slots? I'd rather take the 10 draft slots. And I have no idea if 5 or 8 would be that big of a gap. I don't know, 8 draft slots, something like that. I think as long as you're in those moments, you show something in those moments, that's an important step for year 1. Now, It's very quickly going to turn into you need to start winning. I mean, that's the reality of NFL lives. I mean, not for long. That's kind of where the Pacers are at right now, Eddie. The Pacers had so many late game moments 2 years ago, and they really, really struggled. And then this past season, they delivered in a lot of those late game moments. But still, you're 9 years without a playoff series win. You're 5 years without a playoff win, period. If you're the Pacers, now it's the time to start actually winning. You don't want to get used to the losing. Because, again, Richardson won 6 games at Florida. I mean, we're going to see Florida and Utah tonight. That was the big Richardson late game moment last year.
Gosh, college football is back tonight.
College football is back. Florida at Utah. Last year in the Swamp, it was Richardson on the second and goal, read option, which he kept for the game-winning touchdown. I mean, that was the kind of the big moment. And Richardson has talked about this. Eddie, that was Utah week 1. And we'll get more into Richardson next week on what we need to see from him in year 1. That can be kind of our focus next week. I think it was week 2. The very next game, Eddie, is Will Levis and Kentucky. And Richardson, by his own admission, was a mental wreck going into that game. Oh my gosh, I'm playing the other SEC quarterback that people are talking about high in the draft. Everyone is talking about me in the Utah game, and I could be up for the Heisman. All of that. And he was awful against Kentucky. Awful. And after that, it was big-time mental coach seek out, try to get a little bit more into that aspect to it. And it was a low that he had to go through, I think, and I think he would admit this, to kind of reach some of the mental mindset where he's at. So those are some of the things he now needs to experience professionally. Highs, lows, unscripted moments. That's the biggest thing. You can't script out an NFL season. You can't. That's why it's a league that we are obsessed with. How do you react to the unscripted?
3 Twitter questions left. Alex, I saw Isaiah Rodgers was signed by the Eagles, and it made me curious. I may be in the minority, but I like that the Colts emphasize character by taking captains in the draft. What I don't get, though, is rumored prior interest in players like Deshaun Watson and Kareem Hunt. While in a vacuum, I understand cutting Rodgers, wouldn't it make more sense to keep a guy you helped cultivate, let the suspension teach him a lesson, and help him grow, as opposed to kicking the tires on guys with sexual and physical assault allegations? How does Kevin think the Colts reconcile the optics there?
Boy, it's such a great question, and it's really hard. I mean, I'll go back, I guess, to Ballard's answer to me about Kareem Hunt yesterday, and that we vet. I tend to think when stuff happens in your own building, under your own watch, that's when you're more critical of it. The Rodgers situation. That's when you say you're gone. But then Philly looks at it and says, that didn't happen here. We'll give him the second chance. And I guess you can point to whatever, Josh Sills situation or maybe a Kareem Hunt situation. Ballard's first response to me about Hunt was, he's played in the league a long time. I think that was the first part of the answer. I'm like, well, part of me is like, does that mean that all of a sudden what happened in Vegas and him kicking a woman just disappears? And this gets into so much of moral compass, which no one listens to this podcast to hear my moral compass. Oh my gosh, I had someone reach out to me after the Kareem Hunt thing back about a month ago and was like, I was in jail for 5 years. Should I not have gotten a second chance? And obviously that's a big drastic situation. I mean, it's life impacting, threatening, however you want to describe it. How I view this is the NFL to me is a privilege. And sometimes there are consequences for actions. And when that happens, privileges are usually taken away as opposed to rights. Again, that's my moral compass 101 for 45 seconds. Turn off the podcast if you want. Strongly disagree with me. Whatever. That's kind of my thoughts. As far as character, I get what Ballard's thinking for the most part of you work hard, you're a captain, we feel like you can reach your potential. I think that is more so where they side in the high character sorts of players. I mean, they'll take guys with whatever, drug suspensions. I'm trying to think of other things that maybe weren't necessarily listed here. Obviously, some people will view physical sexual assault in different cases. So the optics are blurry, gray area. Very hard to, and it's also very hard for us to know. It's okay, legally what happens? Was this literally an incident that was blown out of proportion? And I'm just talking in general. When you have star athlete incident with common human folk, there's 2 sides to look at it. Oftentimes. One is blown out of proportion. The common folk is looking for 15 minutes of fame. You hear that? Or some people would say the athlete just has so much money, they'll just pay them enough for it all to go away.
Yeah.
It's just hard. It is hard.
I know, like you look around the league too, like Joe Mixon.
Sure. I mean, yeah. Let's not act like this is just. Let's just act like this is not a Colts question. Like,
Right.
I don't want to make that at all. I've said this many times about the Colts. And the Isaiah Rodgers thing was the first time in a while. The Colts very rarely show up on the ESPN ticker. Very rarely.
For things of that nature.
For, yes, arrest, suspension, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, very rarely. So I think for the most part, the Colts do a great, great job with it. And some people don't care about it. Alex clearly has a question on it. I think that's fine. I think I don't know, maybe it's a dad in me coming out. Maybe it's the father of a daughter coming out in me with that. But it's tons of gray area.
How is Rosie Bowen, by the way?
Rosie Bowen's great. Yeah, high energy. 3 years old, talking a lot, sass, teenager.
Teenager. She's 3.
She's a teenager. If we had a third and you could tell me we get another Rosie Bowen, I might not have any hair left. And if I did, a lot of it would be gray.
How is she as a big sister?
She's great. I love her a lot. Can't wait to pick her up today after school.
Heinrich or Henrik? I always forget how to say it. Henrik, yes. What kind of game are you expecting from Anthony Richardson against Jacksonville? Do you feel like he is going to play it safe and use his legs a lot, or will he also see multiple attempts for deep passes? Thanks from Finland.
Yeah, I think
Finland. Did I say that. Finland?
Yeah, Finland.
I couldn't tell if I added another D after in or
Henrik
not.
has sent in questions before.
He has.
Eddie, I think Shane Steichen has zero hesitation to run Anthony Richardson. Zero.
Not in the way that he used Jalen Hurts.
Zero hesitation. He's going to be running, and I mean the playbook obviously be open come week 1. I mean, look at the preseason. I thought they used a lot more no huddle and tempo. That's what they did all through training camp. I was surprised we saw it as much in the games. I think it was out there. The Colts had the number 1 RPO rate of any team in the preseason. I mean, yeah, you're going to open it all. You're going to see the Eagles scrum play on a short. You're going to see all of it. He's going to be running. There would be no kid gloves with Anthony Richardson. None.
That's good. That's encouraging. Last Twitter question comes from Blue Heavy Podcast. What grade would you give Chris Ballard on how he handled this offseason minus the Jonathan Taylor situation?
C plus, B minus. Too harsh, not harsh enough.
I'd say not harsh enough.
I really like to hire Shane Steichen from an offensive mind. I like the pairing. I like the fact that they finally swung at quarterback. I like that after quarterback, you came back with premium positions with premium draft picks. Free agency, obviously I have some concerns there. Is Ebukam really the guy? Offensive line depth, receiver. That's where I would downgrade. I mean, if you're taking Taylor out of it, which is that's like saying, well, Mrs. Lincoln, if you take out the situation with your husband at the play, how was it? That's just, I don't know if I can go there. But yeah, I'd say C plus or B minus.
Yeah, I was going to say C. Just for the reasons you listed. Like, you were going to have a rookie quarterback. And I just didn't feel like he's done enough to put him in a position to succeed.
That's totally fair. And I don't disagree with that. I guess I just look at getting modern at head coach, finding a guy with that quarterback pedigree, finally taking a swing at quarterback. Those have such greater impacts on the future of your franchise that those are your midterms, if you will, if we're going to continue down the educational analogy.
All right, that's all for Twitter questions. Pod next Wednesday, right?
Yeah, let's go for Wednesday, Eddie. We're in it, baby. We are in it. Again, we'll have some written content up on the website all weekend long, next week as well, as we continue to inch closer to week 1. Everybody enjoy the final off weekend of the NFL calendar.
Are you doing anything for Labor Day weekend?
I am watching football. I am drinking beer, and I'm hoping no one bothers me.
What's your beer of choice? All right, so I'll pester you all weekend then.
It depends the setting I'm in.
Okay.
If we're going day game, I'm probably going to drink a couple lighter actions to get me through the night. But if I'm First one's cracking at 8 o'clock. Let's get a little Rheingeist going. Get a little zombie dust going.
I forgot to bring this
Bell's
up.
Two-Hearted.
Overall, your thoughts on week 1 for the Fighting Irish and how they performed?
I like what I saw. I like it a lot. I'm optimistic.
Okay, Chris Ballard.
No procedural penalties. Operationally, very sound. 5 touchdowns on the first 5 drives. You can't judge your defense off anything against Navy, but I like what I saw. I've got some optimism about the Irish.
You'll fight, win, beat Tennessee State.
I had to throw that in there because we didn't talk about him.
I am Kevin Bowen. He is Eddie Garrison. It's a longer podcast. Hopefully you guys are consuming it. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Enjoy the day off on Monday. We'll talk to you on Wednesday.